Welcome back to Life of Bliss. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit more of the Sinbosen FP20000Q clone amplifier. This is a 4-channel amplifier that I'm using to power my 3 Stereo Integrity HS24 24-inch subwoofers. Now they call these clone amplifiers because they may or may not look pretty similar to another company's product. I don't know, I guess I can see the similarity, but no, obviously they do look very, very similar and they're doing it for an obvious reason. I don't know if the technology for the amplification is 100% the same or not, but we'll get into some specs here in a little bit and we'll open it up and take a look on the inside again. But right now I'm gonna go over the front and rear panels and kind of how I have everything set up. So starting over here on the far side, there is the power on and off switch and a remote on and off switch. Now, obviously the power turns it on and off. The remote switch, I have not seen it do any function whatsoever. It could just be something that I'm not aware of, but it's functioning just the same with that remote turned on or off. Moving to the center, you'll find that each channel has an LED indicator and status bar, as well as attenuation knobs for each channel. The LED panel will tell you several things, including a power LED indicator, a level indicator, voltage and current clips, temperature warning, very high frequency warning, and whether 2 channels are running in bridge mode. I'm running 1 HS24 per channel on this amp and have the attenuation knobs turned to about the 3 o'clock position. Moving to the back, there is a voltage limiter for each channel to prevent too much current going to the speakers, reducing the risk of blowing one of your subs. I have each channel set to the max voltage as I want the max power available to the HS24s. So from my receiver, I use an RCA cable from the sub 1 output to the mini DSP 2x4 HD. This little box is critical in aligning and tuning multiple subwoofers in your room. So I'm not going to get into how to set up and use the mini DSP. I'm going to leave that up to my buddy Steven, who runs the Home Theater Gurus YouTube channel. He's got a great tutorial on how to set this up, align your subs, tune them properly for your room, and it's very in-depth. I'm going to leave a link to that down below in the description. Be sure to check out his page if you're interested in how to use this and just set up your room properly in general. Once this is hooked up to the receiver, there are 4 outputs along the back side of the mini DSP used to connect to an amplifier. For this particular amplifier, it has XLR inputs, so we need an RCA to XLR cable. RCA side is going to go to the mini DSP, XLR is going to go in one of the 4 XLR inputs on the back side of the amp. Now to output the signal to my subs, I'm using the Nutric Speak-On connectors with 12 gauge wire running through my walls. There are 4 outputs on the back side of the amplifier here and indicators to show you which channels need to be hooked up if running in bridged mode. Looking at the dip switch panel on the back, you can see you can adjust your gain setting, whether channels are bridged or not, and your voltage peak limiter. You also have a switch mode you can change from hard to soft. I have all these set to hard. Per the manual, when running subwoofers, it's best to have it on the hard setting. Currently I have my gain set to 41 dB and my voltage peak limiter maxed out at 195. So like I said, I wanted a lot of power available for these HS24s. They're conservatively rated at 2000 watts RMS and they've been able to handle pretty much anything this amplifier has thrown at them. Now this particular model is the 230 volt version. There's a 115 or 230 volt option that you can choose from. It did not actually come with the correct plug. It came with just a standard 110 or 120 volt plug, your regular wall outlet versus the, something that you throw on your dryer here in the US anyways. So I actually had to take that apart and put the correct plug on. So if that's not something that you're comfortable with, just keep that in mind. Sometimes things get lost in translation and they don't actually send the right plug. But I did verify, I took it apart and it was the correct voltage model, just did not have the correct plug. Now with all that fun stuff out of the way, I say we open it up, take a look inside, and talk about some power numbers. While I'm taking this apart, let's go over a few specs. The Sinbosen FP20000Q weighs in at 36.5 pounds and measures 17.5 inches wide, 20 inches deep, and 3.5 inches tall. Like I mentioned, this is the 230 volt option. It does come with a standard 115 volt option as well, but you'll most likely get more power out of the amp if you go with the 230 volt version. The amp has rack mounts attached and takes up 2 rack units. So here's a look at the inside. I'm not going to go over everything here. I went over a lot of it in the first video I did on this amp. Here towards the back are the amplifier modules, and I'll get into those as well in just a moment. I did mention that remote button earlier didn't do anything. That's because it's not hooked up to anything. There are the 3 prongs for it right there. Does absolutely nothing. Got your 2 massive power supplies up front. All of these caps in here, that's what gives it its great burst ability and burst power. These heat sinks are actually not copper, they're anodized aluminum. You can see around that screw there where they've countersunk it just a bit. It's no longer copper orange, so not copper heat sinks. The fans, there are 2 fans in front, 1 behind each one of the heat sinks there, or excuse me, the power supplies, and then 4 behind the heat sinks in the back, 2 on either side. And I'll go ahead and give you just a little preview of what they sound like when it's started up. We're about a foot in front. So yeah, not the quietest amp in the world. Now, Sinbosen advertises this amplifier as being able to put out 4,000 watts RMS times 4 channels. Now, I don't have the equipment to test this output, but I am going to be linking a thread in the description for an individual on AVS forum that was able to run some tests on the FP20000Q. Now, that's relevant for this amplifier because both of these amps have the same power supplies and the same number of capacitors, with the major difference being the amp boards, so similar power numbers could be expected. When testing, he was able to get 4,000 watts per channel with 2 channels being driven, 1 on each power supply. Power was limited to 8,000 watts continuous for the entire amplifier, but that is some seriously big power. From that, you can figure if all 4 channels would be driven, you could roughly get 2,000 watts RMS continuous power for each channel. Now, the crazy thing with these amplifiers is their burst ability. At 20 Hertz, he was able to test the amp and get 12,500 watts total burst power. At 80 Hertz and above, that number jumped to 17,000 watts. 17,000 watts, that is crazy.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts!
Now, burst power really comes into play during movies where there's explosions or cannon fire, gunshots, I don't know, Godzilla stomping around. So that's really where you're going to see that burst potential really come into play. When you're listening to music like dance music or techno or anything like that where there's continuous sine waves, you're not really going to be seeing that benefit. You're really going to be limited to the RMS power of the amp. But even at that, you've got 2,000 watts RMS times 4 channels and double that if you bridge to the channels. This is a seriously powerful amp, and if you've got some power-hungry subs in your setup, this amp's going to drive them. Now, just a few other things he mentioned in his write-up. The total harmonic distortion was 0.08% at 4 ohms. The amp is not 2 ohm stable, and the efficiency is over 90%. Again, I'll leave a link down in the description below for his thread on AVS forum so you can see the numbers for yourself. So yeah, this gives off big power, but at what cost? Well, when I bought this amp roughly a year and a half ago, it was about $900 shipped to my door from Sinbosen. Now, Sinbosen doesn't have pricing directly on their website, and that's due to there being fluctuations in the currency exchange and shipping rates and that sort of thing that goes along with selling internationally. Their sales rep, Dan, said that they'd rather have you contact them directly, which I'll leave their information down in the description below as well, if you're wanting to check out what it would cost shipped to your door. Now, that being said, they do have a newer version on their website. It has larger capacitors as well as fans lining the back of the amp here instead of a heat sink in there. So that may affect pricing, but you'd have to contact them. I'd suspect it would still be roughly the same price. Now, $900 is pretty cheap when you're talking about this sort of power. Looking at amps from other companies, you can be spending anywhere from 4 to 6 times that amount to get similar power ratings. And while that's a great deal, there are some risks involved. First, as I mentioned with myself and I've seen with others, they sent the wrong plug on the power cord. And while that isn't a huge deal, it's something to be aware of, and just know that you might have to swap that out for the correct plug-in that you need. Next is the lack of a repair center. Now with them shipping internationally like they do, they don't want to have the amplifiers shipped back to them for repairs, so it's kind of up to you to troubleshoot and to make any repairs that need to be done. Now I personally haven't had any issues with this amp, but I've seen cases where 2 others have had an amp board fry and they've had to go in and replace it themselves. Sinbosen's been pretty good about sending them the parts for just the cost of the shipping from what it seems like, but they did have to replace it. It was about a 10 or 15 minute job, they said. It wasn't too difficult, but if that's something that you're not wanting to get into, probably need to look elsewhere for an amp. There are also several other companies that offer a similar looking clone amp with the same name. Now I'm not sure of the quality of those other companies' amplifiers, but it's the general consensus on AVS forum that either Sinbosen or XBS is a safer bet to buy from. Now I have this amp set up in my equipment rack in a closet underneath my stairs. And I did mention the fan noise earlier being a bit loud. This is not something that I would personally want in my listening area. It needs to be either in a closet or in a separate room, something like that where you're not going to be hearing these loud, annoying fans the entire time you're trying to watch a movie. Now with the newer design with new fans in there, that might have solved the issue somewhat, but I still think it's probably going to be pretty loud even with the newer version. And with all the power that this amp produces comes a lot of heat. I don't even have to have anything playing, and just with this sitting on for a few hours in the closet, it can raise the temperature of that room probably 15 degrees or more if the door's not cracked. This is not an amp that I would throw in an enclosed rack or a TV stand without some serious ventilation. So with all that said, how do I like the FP20000Q? I love it. I love this amplifier. For the money, I cannot believe I'm able to drive 3 24-inch subwoofers as hard as I do, shaking all the walls down here and most of the walls upstairs, and I still have one channel open that I'm not even using. In the past year that I've been using this amp, I've never had it overheat, shut down, mute a channel, go into protect mode, anything like that. It's pretty incredible that you're able to get so much power out of such a relatively small package. If you're needing some serious power on a budget and you don't mind some of the risks mentioned earlier, definitely give this amp a look. Now here in just a minute, I'm going to be heading you guys out with some excursion demos and how the LED panel looks up front when in use. I'm not going to be putting SPL numbers up like I have in the past. Most of these demos are probably peaking around 120 decibels. Unfortunately, I had to keep it kind of tame because my newborn daughter is in the house. But while you're watching these, just keep in mind, most of these demos aren't even blipping the -4 LED on that front panel, which means that over half of the amp's power is still not being used. So let me know what you guys think of the Sinbosen FP20000Q down in the comments below. I do have some plans for that last channel that I'm not using on here, but let me know what your thoughts are on what I should do as well. I hope this helped you guys out. If you are considering a clone amp for your setup, I'll leave links for Sinbosen and all the other products that I'm using in this setup down in the description below. Thanks for checking out Life of Bliss, and I'll be back with more home theater content soon. Now just a quick view of the room before we do the demos. Here's my nice multicolored seating area. Up on the front stage, we have 2 of the Stereo Integrity HS24s. Those are the 24-inch drivers there. Going to the back corner of the room, I have 1 more HS24 filling in that back corner there.